You have the potential to be a great sorcerer. Now, when you're out there, listen to your own heart.
Willow wasn't just a fantasy movie from the 80s. It was George Lucas's decade-long passion project brought to life through blood, sweat, and technical innovation that would change filmmaking forever. The making of Willow erupted into production chaos when storms destroyed entire sets in Wales, actors suffered injuries performing their own stunts, and a pioneering special effects sequence required inventing completely new digital technology. Val Kilmer and Joanne Whalley fell in love on set while the production team battled against weather disasters so severe that crew members were hospitalized. Meanwhile, George Lucas fought studio executives who wanted to slash the budget at every turn. Today, we're diving into 20 weird facts about Willow that even the most dedicated fans don't know. And stick around for our bonus fact, the bizarre connection between this fantasy film and modern smartphones that nobody saw coming. So grab your acorns and magic wands as we reveal what really happened behind the scenes of this fantasy classic. Willow was written specifically for Warwick Davis when he was just 11 years old. George Lucas didn't just cast Warwick Davis as Willow Ufgood. He created the entire film concept for him. The idea sparked during the filming of Return of the Jedi when Davis was just 11 years old playing an Ewok. Lucas was so impressed with the young actor that he promised him a leading role someday. It wasn't a casual comment, it was a pledge that would take 6 years to fulfill. George came to me and said, "I've written this film for you," Davis recalls. "I couldn't believe it. Nobody was making fantasy films with dwarf actors in the lead role at that time." What audiences didn't know was that Lucas fought tremendous resistance from studios who balked at the idea of building a tentpole fantasy film around a little person. Executive meetings erupted into heated arguments, with Lucas refusing to back down on his vision. The risk was enormous, but Lucas stood firm on his commitment to Davis, gambling his reputation on a concept Hollywood deemed unmarketable. Val Kilmer and Joanne Whalley's on-screen romance turned real, and then crashed spectacularly. The chemistry between Madmartigan and Saoirse wasn't just good acting, it was the beginning of a whirlwind romance that would carry Val Kilmer and Joanne Whalley from the Welsh countryside straight to the altar. Their courtship ignited during the brutal winter shoot, with Kilmer pursuing Whalley relentlessly despite her initial resistance. "We were freezing in these metal costumes covered in mud and somehow still managed to fall in love," Whalley later admitted. "It wasn't the most glamorous setting for romance." What started on set culminated in a marriage just months after production wrapped. The couple went on to have 2 children together, but the fairy tale didn't last. Their relationship collapsed under the weight of Hollywood pressures and conflicting schedules, ending in a bitter 1996 divorce filing served to Kilmer while he was on the set of The Island of Dr. Moreau. The passion that flared so brightly between Madmartigan and Saoirse ultimately burned out, leaving behind only their electric on-screen chemistry as evidence of what once was. The production team invented groundbreaking CGI technology that directly influenced Terminator 2. Willow's morphing sequence wasn't just special effects, it was a technological revolution disguised as movie magic. When the sorceress Fin Raziel transforms from a goat to an ostrich to various creatures, the production team faced an impossible challenge with existing technology. They didn't accept limitations, they shattered them. Industrial Light and Magic's visual effects supervisor Dennis Murin and his team invented digital morphing specifically for these sequences, writing entirely new software algorithms that had never existed before. The computer processing was so intensive that each frame took hours to render on the most powerful computers available. "We knew we were creating something that would change filmmaking forever," explains Morin, "but we didn't know if audiences would accept it or reject it as too artificial." This pioneering digital effect directly influenced the liquid metal T-1000 in Terminator 2, Judgment Day 3 years later. James Cameron specifically sought out ILM because of their groundbreaking work on Willow. What began as a simple transformation sequence in a fantasy film became the technological foundation for decades of digital effects that followed, quietly revolutionizing cinema from behind the scenes. The infamous mud scene gave Val Kilmer hypothermia and nearly shut down production. The comedic mud sequence where Madmartigan first meets Sorsha wasn't scripted as a brutal endurance test. It became one, shot in the depths of a Welsh winter. Temperatures plunged below freezing as Val Kilmer wallowed in a mixture of actual mud, chocolate pudding, and freezing water for hours upon hours. I couldn't feel my legs by hour 3, Kilmer later revealed. By hour 6, I couldn't remember my name. The situation deteriorated rapidly when Kilmer began showing signs of hypothermia. His speech slurred and his body temperature dropped dangerously low, forcing a panicked medical team to rush onto the set. Production halted as they wrapped him in thermal blankets and pumped him with warm fluids. Insurance representatives threatened to shut down the entire production over safety concerns. Ron Howard made the controversial decision to continue filming the next day, with heated water now mixed into the mud pit. The scene that audiences laugh at on screen nearly cost the production millions in delays and almost sent one of Hollywood's rising stars to the hospital with a potentially fatal condition. Kilmer's suffering translated into comedy gold, but at a physical price few actors would willingly pay. Hundreds of little people from around the world were cast, creating the largest gathering of dwarf actors in film history. The village of Nelwyn wasn't populated by CGI or camera tricks. It was a revolutionary moment in film representation. Casting director Mike Fenton embarked on a worldwide search, contacting agencies, circuses, and theater companies across 5 continents to find over 200 little people to portray Nelwyn villagers. Many arrived on set having never met another little person before. What was planned as simply a casting requirement transformed into an extraordinary social event that participants still talk about decades later. For many of us, it was the first time we weren't the only little person in the room, remembers Phil Fondacaro, who played Vonkar. There were friendships formed, romances sparked, and even some marriages that came out of that experience. The production created a temporary community unlike anything before or since. Cast members shared stories of discrimination, compared medical experiences, and formed support networks that would last lifetimes. Beyond just making movie history, the Willow production created a pivotal moment for the dwarf community worldwide, offering unprecedented visibility and connection that many participants describe as life-changing. What audiences saw as fantasy villagers was actually a profound cultural milestone happening in real time. 2 babies played Elora Danan, and both grew up with no memory of their iconic role. The prophesied child who would bring down Queen Bavmorda wasn't just one baby. The role of Elora Danan was shared by twins Kate and Ruth Greenfield, just 6 months old during filming. Neither has any memory of their pivotal role in fantasy film history. We've watched it, of course, but it's surreal, Kate Greenfield shared in a rare interview. It's like watching someone else entirely. There's no recognition, no emotional connection to what I'm seeing on screen. The production required multiple babies due to strict regulations, limiting infant working hours to just 20 minutes at a time. The twins alternated throughout shooting, with makeup artists meticulously matching tiny birthmarks and features to maintain continuity. What audiences don't realize is that in many scenes, directors switched babies mid-sequence. The Greenfield twins didn't pursue acting careers after their early brush with fame. They grew up in England, leading normal lives, occasionally appearing at fan conventions, but largely disconnected from their place in film history. Unlike other famous film babies, they experienced the strange dissonance of having their infant selves preserved in cinematic history while having absolutely no personal recollection of the experience that made them famous. The brownies were portrayed by normal-sized actors shooting on massive oversized sets. The tiny brownies Frangine and Rule weren't created with puppets or early CGI as most fans assume. Director Ron Howard opted for a practical solution that required building enormous, perfectly scaled sets that dwarfed the normal-sized actors Kevin Pollak and Rick Overton. These massive set pieces cost millions in additional production expenses. The infamous Brownie Village sequence required constructing a forest clearing where every leaf, twig, and mushroom was built at 12 times normal size. Ordinary objects became architectural challenges. A simple acorn required engineering to support its weight while maintaining realistic appearance. It was like working in a world built for giants, Pollock recalled. You'd reach for what looked like a normal-sized cup, and it would be as big as your entire body. The spatial disorientation was constant. The technique, called forced perspective, wasn't new to filmmaking, but Willow pushed it to extremes never before attempted. The intricate sets proved so expensive that studio executives threatened to cut entire Brownie sequences from the script. Lucas personally funded portions of these oversized builds rather than compromise his vision, investing millions from his own pocket into sets that would appear on screen for just minutes at a time. The Death Dogs weren't just costumes, they were groundbreaking animatronic puppets that terrified the crew. Those snarling beasts hunting baby Alora represented the bleeding edge of creature effects technology. Each death dog required 5 puppeteers operating simultaneously through a complex system of cables, hydraulics, and remote controls. The creatures weren't just props, they were engineering marvels weighing over 200 pounds each, with articulated faces capable of 64 different expressions. Those things were legitimately terrifying, recalls Warwick Davis. Even knowing they weren't real, when they'd activate one next to you unexpectedly, your heart would stop. The production team soon discovered an unintended consequence of their realism. The animatronics proved so convincing that they triggered genuine fear responses in cast members, producing authentic terror reactions on camera. During night shoots, crew members refused to walk past the storage area where the deactivated dogs were kept. The puppets required their own dedicated trailer and specialized technicians who worked through the night repairing hydraulic systems and replacing the artificial saliva mechanism that frequently malfunctioned. What audiences perceive as simple monster costumes represent a pivotal moment in practical effects history, with techniques developed for the Death Dogs later applied to creatures in Jurassic Park and other landmark films. The epic sledding sequence left multiple stuntmen hospitalized with serious injuries. That thrilling shield sledding escape down the snowy mountain wasn't movie magic, it was legitimately dangerous. Stuntmen performed the sequence on actual metal shields, racing down a Welsh mountainside at speeds exceeding 40 miles per hour with minimal protection. The snow-covered slope concealed rocks and sudden drops that couldn't be fully scouted beforehand. It was essentially controlled falling, remembers stunt coordinator Nick Gillard, except we couldn't really control it. The casualties mounted quickly. 3 stuntmen suffered broken bones on the first day of filming alone. One particularly violent crash resulted in a compound fracture that required emergency surgery and ended a veteran stuntman's career. Production insurance representatives threatened daily to shut down the sequence as the injury count climbed. Ron Howard refused to switch to miniatures or optical effects, believing the scene required the raw authenticity that only practical stunts could provide. The determination came at a physical cost. By the sequence's completion, 5 stuntmen had been hospitalized. The scene that audiences experience as a thrilling action set piece left a trail of genuine human suffering in its wake, with several performers still dealing with chronic pain decades later from injuries sustained on that Welsh mountainside. James Horner composed the entire score in just 6 weeks after the original composer quit. The iconic soundtrack that gives Willow its emotional heartbeat almost didn't exist, With just months until release, original composer John Williams suddenly withdrew due to scheduling conflicts, sending the production into crisis mode. James Horner received the emergency call while working on another project and had to create a complete orchestral score from scratch in just 6 weeks, a process that typically takes months. I basically didn't sleep, Horner confessed years later. I lived and breathed that world until I heard the music in my dreams. Go ahead and like and subscribe because we're about to reveal even more mind-blowing facts about this fantasy classic. The next 10 facts get even wilder, including what George Lucas originally wanted to call this movie before the studio stepped in. Working around the clock, Horner composed over 2 hours of original music, recording with the London Symphony Orchestra during 24-hour sessions that pushed musicians to their limits. The pressure produced creative magic. Horner's soaring Willow's theme was written in a single fevered night of composition. The score would later be nominated for multiple awards, with the main theme becoming one of the most recognized pieces of fantasy film music in cinema history, all created under nearly impossible deadline pressure that would have broken less talented composers. The battle sequences employed hundreds of real British Army soldiers on their active duty training days. Those massive armies clashing in Willow's epic battle scenes weren't extras in costume. They were actual soldiers from the British Army's Welsh regiments deployed to the set during their regular training exercises. The Ministry of Defense approved the unusual arrangement, considering the complicated battle choreography valuable tactical training while saving the production millions in extra costs. We had military commanders alongside our assistant directors, might say, explains Ron Howard. They'd be calling genuine military maneuvers that the soldiers performed with precision while our actors tried to hit their marks in the middle of it all. The arrangement created surreal production days where active duty soldiers would arrive in military transport vehicles, change into medieval fantasy armor, and execute battle plans directed by both Hollywood filmmakers and their military superiors. The soldiers brought authentic intensity to the combat scenes, sometimes taking direction too literally and making actual contact during fight sequences. The production medics treated numerous minor injuries sustained by soldiers who approached their roles with military seriousness rather than acting restraint. What audiences see on screen isn't just choreographed fantasy, it's hundreds of professionally trained military personnel executing genuine battle formations, adapted for a fantasy setting, creating a level of tactical realism rarely achieved in fantasy filmmaking. Warwick Davis performed nearly all of his own stunts, suffering injuries that still affect him today. Willow Ufgood's physical challenges weren't just acting for Warwick Davis, they were genuine physical ordeals. Despite being just 17 years old during production, Davis refused a stunt double for all but the most dangerous sequences, insisting on performing his own falls, fights, and river crossings. I wanted Willow's struggles to feel authentic, Davis explains. When you see him exhausted climbing those mountains, that's real exhaustion you're seeing. The dedication came at a significant physical cost. During the river crossing sequence, Davis was swept downstream when the hidden safety wire broke, requiring a dangerous real rescue by crew members. The scene where Willow tumbles down a hillside resulted in 3 broken ribs when Davis hit an unmarked rock. Perhaps most demanding was the sequence carrying baby Elora through mountain passes, filmed in genuinely freezing conditions with Davis hauling the actual weight hour after hour. These injuries have lingered long past production. Davis has undergone multiple surgeries for compressed vertebrae in his neck and spine, directly resulting from stunts performed on Willow. The physical commitment that made his performance so convincing continues to cause him pain decades later, a hidden cost of bringing authenticity to a beloved character that audiences never realized while watching his adventures. The tavern fight scene took 12 days to film, but was largely cut from the final movie. The chaotic tavern sequence where Mad Mardigan fights off multiple attackers represents just a fraction of what was actually filmed. The original scene was an elaborate 15-minute action sequence that took 12 full production days to shoot, requiring the construction of a breakaway tavern where virtually everything, chairs, tables, support beams, was designed to be destroyed during carefully choreographed combat. It was meant to be Mad Mardigan's defining moment, reveals stunt coordinator Nick Gillard. Val trained for months specifically for this scene. The production spared no expense, importing specialty stunt performers from Hong Kong to execute intricate fight choreography blending medieval European combat with Eastern martial arts. The sequence cost over $2 million to shoot, only to have studio executives demand drastic cuts during final editing, reducing it to barely 3 minutes in the released film. The cutting room floor holds footage of elaborate wire stunts, a sequence where Mad Mardigan fights with a broken bottle while blindfolded, and a 3-minute continuous shot following him through multiple levels of the tavern. The scene would have revolutionized fantasy action filmmaking had it remained intact. Instead, only production insiders know how much spectacular footage remains unseen, with the full sequence existing only in an assembly cut that's never been released to the public. Val Kilmer improvised most of his dialogue, driving the screenwriters into constant rewrites. The quotable one-liners and charismatic speeches that made Mad Mardigan a fan favorite weren't in the original script. Val Kilmer, already developing a reputation for being difficult but brilliant, repeatedly abandoned his scripted lines, improvising entirely new dialogue on set, often to the director's initial frustration, but eventual delight. Val would read the scene once, put the script down, and say, "I've got this," remembers screenwriter Bob Dolman. Then he'd deliver something completely different, but somehow better than what we'd written. This creative approach created genuine chaos in the production office, where writers worked overnight shifts, rewriting upcoming scenes to maintain continuity with Kilmer's improvisations from the previous day's shooting. The famous Greatest Swordsman speech was entirely Kilmer's creation, written on set during a lunch break after he felt the original dialogue didn't capture Mad Mardigan's bravado. Ron Howard eventually adapted his directing style, allowing Kilmer several written takes followed by Val takes, where the actor could explore his own instincts. This unorthodox approach extended the shooting schedule but resulted in the distinctive, quotable character that anchors the film. The creative tension between the structured screenplay and Kilmer's freewheeling improvisation created the magnetic unpredictability that makes Mad Mardigan endure as a fantasy icon decades later. The film's disappointing box office nearly ended Ron Howard's directing career. Willow wasn't just a modest financial disappointment, it was a devastating box office underperformer that threatened to derail Ron Howard's entire directing future. After the massive success of Splash and Cocoon, Howard was considered Hollywood's golden director. Willow was supposed to cement his blockbuster credentials. Instead, it crashed hard, earning just $57 million against its $35 million budget. The studio executives were brutal in their assessment. Howard later revealed, "One actually told me to my face I should consider returning to acting because my directing career was finished." The behind-the-scenes fallout was immediate and severe. Howard's next major project was canceled, and 3 scripts he had in development were suddenly not right for him. For nearly a year, Howard couldn't get meetings with major studios who viewed him as creatively unreliable after Willow's failure. His career salvation came only when producer Brian Grazer fought to get him hired for Parenthood, a modestly budgeted family comedy far removed from epic fantasy. The film that audiences now celebrate as a beloved classic represented a career-threatening disaster for its director when released, requiring years for Howard to rebuild his directional reputation and studio trust. The film's eventual cult status came far too late to prevent the professional damage its commercial failure initially caused. The now iconic Nelwyn village was completely destroyed in a freak storm the day after filming completed. The charming Nelwyn village where Willow's journey begins wasn't a temporary set. It was a fully constructed settlement built over 5 months in the Welsh countryside, featuring functional interiors, working water wheels, and gardens planted with actual vegetables. The production design team created not just facades, but a living, breathing village environment. We wanted the actors to feel they were inhabiting a real place, explains production designer Alan Cameron. Every building could be entered, every door open to a complete interior. The morning after the final village scene wrapped, disaster struck without warning. A severe storm system moved through the region with near hurricane-force winds exceeding 90 miles per hour. The production crew, having just celebrated the completion of all village scenes, received emergency calls that the entire set was being destroyed in real time. By the time transportation could reach the remote location, it was too late. The village had been literally torn apart, with entire structures ripped from their foundations. Costumes and props stored in production tents were scattered across miles of countryside. What had stood as a testament to fantasy world building just hours earlier was reduced to splintered wood and debris. Had the storm arrived just 1 day sooner, the film's entire production schedule would have collapsed, likely ending the project entirely. The film created a genuine medical emergency when an actor had an allergic reaction to the transformation makeup. The sequence where the Finn Raziel character finally transforms back to human form nearly turned tragic. Actress Patricia Hayes, who played the restored sorceress, suffered a severe allergic reaction to the specialized makeup used for her transformation. What began as mild irritation during application rapidly escalated to respiratory distress once the cameras rolled. Her breathing changed mid-scene, recalls makeup artist Nick Dudman. By the time we cut, her airway was visibly closing. The medical emergency unfolded with terrifying speed. Hayes' throat began swelling shut as on-set medics administered emergency epinephrine. The remote Welsh filming location meant the nearest hospital was over an hour away. As Hayes struggled to breathe, a production helicopter was commandeered for emergency medical transport while filming shut down. The veteran actress spent 3 days in intensive care, with production insurance representatives threatening to pull coverage if she returned to set. The remaining scenes were completely rewritten, explaining why Raziel has surprisingly little screen time after her dramatic transformation. The near tragedy remained secret for decades, with official production notes attributing the schedule changes to technical challenges with the character's integration. The life-threatening medical emergency remains one of Hollywood's least-known near disasters. George Lucas wanted to call the film Munchkins until Oz copyright lawyers intervened. The fantasy adventure we know as Willow was developed, written, and nearly entered production under a completely different title. George Lucas's original vision was to name the film Munchkins, seeing it as a knowing tribute to the Wizard of Oz's little people while establishing his own unique fantasy universe. George was absolutely set on that title, remembers producer Nigel Wool. It was on all our early production documents and pre-visualization artwork. The title remained in place until just 3 months before filming, when MGM's legal department sent a sternly worded cease and desist letter. The Wizard of Oz rights holders claimed exclusive ownership of the term Munchkins and threatened immediate legal action if production proceeded under that name. The last-minute legal challenge sent the marketing department into chaos, with thousands of dollars of preliminary marketing materials suddenly rendered unusable. Lucas fought the decision bitterly, arguing that Munchkin had entered common usage and couldn't be copyright protected. The dispute reached such intensity that it required direct intervention from studio heads to prevent a costly legal battle. Lucas finally relented, allowing the title change to Willow just weeks before principal photography began, though early crew jackets and production equipment still bear the original Munchkins logo, now collector's items among film history buffs. Jean Marsh developed actual bruising from wearing Queen Bavmorda's crown for 12-hour shooting days. The intimidating metal crown that gives Queen Bavmorda her fearsome silhouette wasn't just a costume piece, it was a literal instrument of physical torture for actress Jean Marsh. Weighing nearly 8 pounds and anchored to a rigid internal frame, the crown created intense pressure points against Marsh's skull during the 12-hour shooting days. By week 3, I had permanent indentations in my scalp, Marsh revealed years later. The pain became part of my performance. That perpetual anger wasn't entirely acting. The crown's design prioritized visual impact over performer comfort, with metal prongs digging into Marsh's scalp and a tight internal band that triggered migraine headaches. Medical staff regularly treated abrasions and pressure wounds hidden beneath her hairline. The physical ordeal intensified when Marsh began developing concerning symptoms: dizziness, vision changes, and neck spasms from supporting the unbalanced weight for extended periods. Despite medical concerns, Marsh refused modifications that might compromise the crown's appearance on screen. The physical suffering translated directly into her performance, with the constant discomfort fueling the character's bitter rage. The visible winces when Bavmorda adjusts her headpiece aren't acting choices, but genuine reactions to pain, method acting through actual physical suffering that informed one of fantasy cinema's most memorable villains. Willow's magic acorns were filled with actual acid that burned through production equipment. Those seemingly innocent acorns that Willow uses against the fearsome troll contained genuinely dangerous chemicals. The special effects team needed the acorns to create instant smoke upon impact, developing a volatile chemical compound sealed inside fragile resin shells. The solution worked perfectly on camera, but proved legitimately hazardous to everyone involved. "We essentially created miniature acid bombs," admits special effects supervisor John Richardson. "The chemical reaction was so corrosive it would eat through fabric, wood, even metal, if left in contact long enough." The dangerous props required special handling protocols, with cast members prohibited from touching them directly. During the troll sequence, the substances caused genuine damage to camera equipment when residue from broken acorns corroded lens elements overnight. More concerning were the minor chemical burns suffered by several crew members and a costume department disaster when an acorn accidentally crushed inside a storage container destroyed several irreplaceable costume pieces. The genuine danger extended to environmental concerns, with Welsh environmental authorities investigating when dead vegetation was discovered where acorn scenes had been filmed. Modern CGI would render such dangerous practical effects unnecessary, but in 1988, the production risked using genuinely hazardous materials to achieve the magical effects audiences take for granted. Practical movie magic created through legitimately dangerous means. The pioneering morphing effect created for Willow didn't just influence movies, it fundamentally altered the trajectory of consumer technology in ways nobody could have predicted. When John Knoll, one of ILM's key Willow effects developers, created software to manipulate digital images, he had no idea he was laying groundwork for a technological revolution. Knoll and his brother Thomas took the image processing technology developed for Willow and refined it into a commercial product they called Photoshop, initially launched as a direct result of their Willow effects work. Adobe purchased their program, which became the foundation of digital image processing worldwide. The algorithms we developed for Willow's transformation sequences became the mathematical basis for how digital images are processed today, explains Thomas Knoll. Every time you use a filter on Instagram or edit a photo on your phone, you're using mathematical principles we developed to turn Finn Raziel from a goat into a bird. This direct technological lineage means the visual effects technology created for a 1988 fantasy film quite literally shapes how billions of people interact with images daily. The digital imaging revolution that powers social media, smartphone cameras, and modern visual communication traces directly back to a fantasy sequence where a sorceress transforms between animals, perhaps the most profound yet unrecognized cultural impact any fantasy film has ever achieved. Willow wasn't just a fantasy film, it was a technological pioneer, a career-defining challenge, and a production that pushed everyone involved to their absolute limits. What appeared on screen as movie magic required genuine human sacrifice behind the scenes, careers risked, bodies broken, and creative boundaries shattered. Its legacy lives not just in fantasy filmmaking, but in the technological DNA of our everyday digital lives. From the smartphone in your pocket to the special effects in modern blockbusters, Willow's influence extends far beyond its modest box office performance. If you enjoyed these revelations about this fantasy classic, hit that subscribe button and leave a comment telling us which Willow fact surprised you most. And remember, forget all you know, because the magic of filmmaking flows through even the smallest of productions.